As promised then, it's time for Top Story now here on France 24. I'm joined by Catherine Norris-Trent from our International Affairs desk today. We're going to be looking in more depth at NATO's continuing military campaign in Libya. Several NATO commanders have, in recent days, questioned whether the alliance has enough resources to keep up a long-term fight against the Gaddafi regime. Some are even questioning whether airstrikes alone will ever be enough to bring the military operation to a close. All this, of course, at a time as well of economic austerity for many NATO members. So, Catherine, first of all, in terms of resources, lots of different views on this, I know, but how long can NATO keep going?
Well, that is a very good question, and one that lots of senior military figures in NATO member countries have been posing in recent days. We've been hearing some expressions of concern about whether the alliance does have enough in terms of resources to keep up a long-term campaign in Libya. The operation there now has entered its fourth month, and that's despite what we heard at the beginning of the operation back in March. I don't know if you remember, the French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé said then this would be a campaign of days or weeks, certainly not months. Well, obviously that has now proved to be the case. The military situation has been deadlocked somewhat, and that's been giving the jitters, it seems, to some senior military figures. For example, we've had the head of the British Navy warning that the British fleet will be unable to maintain its pace of operations off the Libyan coast, which has proved key in launching the bombing raids. He's saying, Admiral Sir Mark Stanhope saying that beyond a 6-month timeline, the British government, is going to have to make some, quote, challenging decisions if it's going to keep those ships in the water off the coast of Libya. And we've also heard from a French senior NATO official saying that coalition resources would become critical if the intervention in Libya continues. And again, saying that key decisions are going to have to be made about resources coming up in the future. And that was from General Stéphane Abrial. And we can listen to him speaking earlier this week now.
If the operation were to last long, of course, the resource issue would become critical.
Ako operacija počinje da se odugovlači, naravno da će ključno pitanje postati resursi.
But at this stage, the forces engaged do have the means necessary to conduct the operation.
U ovoj fazi snage koje su tamo angažovane I dalje imaju sredstava da nastave s operacijama.
If additional resources are needed, this will obviously be a political decision.
So military leaders really starting to put pressure on governments of NATO member countries for more resources, basically more money. So while concern has been expressed, though, we've heard from NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen. He sought, among other things, to try and perhaps reassure about the length of the mission. He was meeting with British Prime Minister David Cameron in London, and he said that resources will be found and that the operation will continue for as long as necessary. We can listen to him now on that.
We have just a few weeks ago decided to extend our operation for further 3 months, and allies and partners are committed to provide the necessary resources and assets to continue this operation and see it through to a successful conclusion, and a successful conclusion would be a peaceful transition to democracy.
And this must be costing a fortune. I mean, has anyone tried to put a figure on it?
Well, there's no exact compilated figure for the whole of NATO. We have got some data from individual countries. If we look at US spending so far, as of June the 3rd, the United States has spent $716 million on this campaign, and projected spend, if it continues until September, is $1.1 billion, so an awful lot of extra money there. France is spending around €1 million a day. It's $1.4 million, and that also could rise totals at the moment about €87 million. So a lot of money at a time when many NATO countries are in a time of austerity and trying to cut their budget deficit.
And we've also heard, of course, a lot about divisions within NATO. How's that affecting the mission?
Well, it's the divisions have really surfaced. Transatlantic divisions have surfaced over this campaign. We've heard very strident comments from US Defence Secretary Robert Gates, who said in no uncertain terms that other NATO countries need to pull their weight and need to start spending more money and giving more resources. He said on Friday that the military capabilities just aren't there in Europe in assisting the US in Libya. And he expressed concern that European countries don't have enough in the way of munitions and that we'll have to rely on the United States. And overall, the US contributes 75% of NATO funding. And we've heard from NATO Secretary General that he's warning of perhaps a two-tier NATO system if this disparity in spending isn't resolved.
And in the US particularly, there's been a lot of pressure, isn't there, to keep the costs down?
Absolutely. It's becoming a real political hot potato for Barack Obama. I mean, obviously, the economy and spending is a really big issue anyway. It's election year coming up, and there's been a debate already for Republican hopeful presidential candidates, and they all, on Monday, slammed Barack Obama's decision to deploy US forces and saying that was costing too much money and that US should be spending its money elsewhere.
And do we have any idea how it's actually going on the ground? I mean, we hear individual reports of advances, retreats, but how's the sort of general situation seem to be evolving?
Well, there's been some slight gains, it seems, for the rebels and therefore for their NATO allies as well. Now, surrounding the port of Misrata, which has been a key battleground in the west of Libya, rebels had advanced towards Zlatan, but now not consolidated those gains, and we're waiting to see what NATO follows up with in terms of bombing.
All right, Catherine, thank you very much. That's Catherine Norris-Trent from our International Affairs Desk. A lot more, of course, from the desk as the day goes on here on France 24. Stay with us if you can.
More than 2,100 international exhibitors. 138,000 trade visitors. Over 140 aircrafts. Daily flying displays. Where aerospace leaders get down to business. The International Paris Air Show Le Bourget from the 20th to the 26th of June.